Hi, I'm Zina with Zina is Sewing, and I'm glad that you're joining me today for this quick tutorial on how to turn a t-shirt into a t-shirt dress. We're going to take a simple store-bought t-shirt and add some scraps of fabric to it. This is a great way to scrap bust those extra fabric pieces that you didn't need or that you're thinking about throwing away and keeping us from being wasteful. So I hope you'll join me for this quick tutorial. So I'm using a Nike t-shirt for this tutorial, and the t-shirt that I used before when I made this was a Walmart t-shirt. However, I actually like the style of the Walmart t-shirt and the Nike t-shirt because it has this curved bottom, which kind of makes a cute curved bottom for a dress. You can use any t-shirt, it doesn't matter. But the point is that you'll already have a hem, so you don't have to hem the bottom of the dress. And basically you're just cutting off a section, adding a piece of fabric in the middle, and then you'll have a top and a bottom, and then you'll stitch it back up. So you first want to determine where you want your fabric to be inserted, and that means determining how much you want on the bottom of the dress and how much of the top you want, and then determining the length of fabric that you want in between. So that would make your dress either longer or shorter. So keep in mind, you have a t-shirt, you might want to try it on first and then determine how long you want it. For me, I'm only adding about 8 inches of fabric in the middle because this t-shirt already comes comes around the top of my thigh. And so I kind of want it to be still short and cute, but not reveal too much, not too revealing. So just kind of keep that in mind as far as how much fabric that you want in between your two pieces, your top and bottom of your t-shirt, which will determine the length of your dress. Okay, so once you've determined how much, and then determining how much you want on the bottom and how much you want to keep on the top. Once you've done that, you want to draw a line like I've already done here, and then you're just going to cut the bottom part off. So let's go ahead and do that. And I'm just going to use my rotary cutter and cut straight across this line that I've already made. All right. Okay. And then we're just going to hold this piece out, and you see I've cut across the tag there. You're just going to hold this piece out, and then you're just going to attach the fabric to both of these. So first you need to determine how much fabric, or what's the length of the fabric that you're going to need. And this is very simple. You're basically just going to measure across the bottom of your t-shirt where you've cut, and whatever measurement you get, you might want to add about a ½ inch to that, or an inch, determining on how much seam allowance you're going to give yourself. So for me, this t-shirt measures almost 29 inches. So I've already cut my fabric, and I've cut this scuba knit fabric, and I cut a little bit over 29 inches so I could allow myself some seam allowance. And I also marked where I'm gonna stitch the sides up, because you'll do that first. We're gonna stitch the sides, and then we'll stitch this section, the middle section, to the top, and then the bottom of our t-shirt to the bottom of our fabric. Okay, so, and again, like I said, mine measured almost 29 inches and a half. And keep in mind, you want to make sure that you are measuring your t-shirt, because the fabric has to fit in the t-shirt. If it's too small, you're going to have gathers, and if it's too big, then it won't fit, and you'll either be stretching the t-shirt out or you'll have gathers in your fabric. So make sure that your fabric is not too big for the t-shirt width, and that you don't have to ease it in. And then make sure you give yourself room for seam allowance. That's very important, because you're going to stitch this together. So if you give an exact measurement and then cut this exact, remember, once you sew up the sides, it still won't fit. It'll be too small. All right, so keep that in mind. The other thing that I'm going to do to this t-shirt is I'm going to do something that I didn't do to the first t-shirt dress. I'm going to actually cut off the ends of the sleeve cap, and I'm going to, or just the hem actually, and I'm going to add a flounce. And I'm using a pattern. I'm actually using McCall's 7711. So I'm going to use View C, View C. And I'm going to use the flounce sleeve from View B, excuse me. I'm going to use the flounce sleeve from View B. And I'm going to add flounce sleeve out of this same material to the end of this sleeve. Now, the key to this is to make sure that the opening of the flounce is the same circumference of your t-shirt opening. So when I measured the circumference of my t-shirt opening, I got about 9 inches, and I had to add about an inch to the actual pattern flounce, because even on the size large, the flounce hole or circumference wasn't going to be big enough, and that's including the seam allowance. So keep that in mind as well, because once I stitch this together, I'm going to take away some of the fabric or some of the circumference, and so I want to make sure that once I've stitched it together, I've accounted for seam allowance, and that the seam allowance will also fit around the circumference of my t-shirt sleeve. So t-shirts are usually a little bit bigger than most of our clothes. The armholes are usually a little bit bigger, so you want to make sure that you account for that fabric. And so I'm going to try my best to line this up, so I won't have to cut all the way around, and hopefully I can get this just perfect. And I'm just going to use this seam right here, and I'm just going to cut off the seam allowance. And this is the part where I'll add the flounce. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. And I'm just going to line these up. Make sure it's straight. And then I'm just going to cut off the edge of this. All right, now that we've done that, we're ready to go to our sewing machine. We're going to stitch the sides of our fabric together first, right sides together. And because I have stripes, I'm matching my stripes, making sure that they line up. So we're going to stitch both sides together on our fabric, and then we're going to sew the top of our t-shirt to the top of our fabric, and the bottom of our t-shirt to the bottom of our fabric. All right, so let's go to the sewing machine. Okay, so I'm at the sewing machine, and because I'm working with a knit fabric, I am going to sew this up on my serger. I have a Brother 1034D. And it's just easier and quicker. If you don't have a serger, that is okay. You can definitely sew this up on the sewing machine. You would just need to make sure, if you're working with knit fabric, that you do a zigzag stitch or a stretch stitch if your machine has that option. That is to keep the stitches from breaking once you start moving in the garment. And if you're using a t-shirt, you definitely, when you're sewing the fabric to the t-shirt, if your t-shirt, the jersey knit, you want to make sure that you're using either a serger or a stretch stitch or a zigzag stitch. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and stitch this. Keep in mind I'm working with stripe material, so I'm going to make sure that I align my stripes as I sew. And this is just easier and quicker for me, and also making sure that I have the right seam allowance to give myself. And make sure that you do the same thing on the other side. We also want to sew the flounce of the sleeves, matching the darts, and we want to go ahead and just stitch a hem in the flounce to close it up, and make sure that you allow, again, the seam allowance that's going to fit your sleeve if you're adding flounce to your t-shirt. So make sure you add that seam allowance, the correct seam allowance that's going to fit the sleeve of your t-shirt.
You're going to stitch both of them.
Once you've stitched the flounce opening closed, you want to go ahead and press your seams to one side. And then if you did it on your sewing machine, you're going to just press your seams open. Then you want to go ahead and press up your hem so we can stitch our hem in before we add the flounce. Remember, when you are stitching your fabric to your t-shirt, you want to match. You want to lay right sides together, and you want to make sure that you match up your side seams to the side seam of the t-shirt. That's very important so that your seams are not in the wrong place. And then you want to press your seams once you finish. And remember, you can make this as wide as you want or as short as you want. You can also cut higher on the t-shirt, lower on the t-shirt, depending on how much of a bottom. You can use different fabrics. I wanted to use a scuba fabric. This is a fabric from Minerva, gray and white scuba knit, which is what I used for the other t-shirt dress. And you can do something with the sleeve if you wanted to. I added a flounce sleeve. You can leave the sleeve as is. I did on the first dress. You can also do something with the collar. You can change the collar around. So I will make sure I get pictures in this dress so you can see what it looks like styled. And remember, if you make a t-shirt dress using this tutorial, please make sure you tag me on Instagram at hashtag zinaissewing. zinaissewing. And don't forget to like this video, give it a thumbs up, and subscribe.